Started off low, then they turned global. We fought for integration, now we are antisocial. We can't make a change unless we use our vocals. So I pray to God in every moment I stay hopeful. Ain't no good intentions, everybody trying to hurt you. We like a guilty conscience cause nobody is remorseful. We could be heroes, but got them on the villains. An imperfect world full of imperfect civilians. We need to accept the fact that we are all different and made like December 25th cause we so gifted. I'm just staying still, but my mind keep on running. The world gonna end based off of self-destruction. Seems like nobody sees what we are becoming. Parents don't understand us.
Hi, my name's Vasakan.
And I'm Ashley.
And we're the host of Global Teen Summit.
And this is our panelist.
Hi, I'm Natalia.
Hi, I'm Isabel.
Hi, I'm Xavier.
So just a little information on what Global Teen Summit is. It started back with BET's Teen Summit back in the late 1980s. It was a show that gave teens a voice, and so now we've kind of remade that show so that everybody can have a voice. Because honestly, there's not a lot of positive information or positivity in general on social media or on television. So we wanted to give a positive outlook on what issues teens are going through, whether it's serious or funny or whatever's going on. Just something different than what you would normally see on television or social media. When we come back, we'll be discussing teen sex trafficking.
Tampa Preparatory School offers students in grades 6 through 12 unparalleled education with its innovative, student-centered curriculum. Tampa Prep students are independent thinkers who learn through a proactive, hands-on approach. Tampa Preparatory School, a place to think, create, be yourself, aspire to excellence, and go beyond. More than just a college preparatory school, a preparation for life with a higher purpose than self. We encourage you to check out our website for more information.
About a month ago in Nigeria, a country in Midwest Africa, 200 plus students were stolen from their boarding school by a terrorist organization and sold to sex traffickers. Here with us now are Miss Nicole Ledford and Kendra McKay. They created a campaign to promote awareness about such inhumanity, and they're with us now to talk about it. So could you tell us a little bit more about this campaign?
Sure, thank you. I teach 10th grade English at Blake High School, and we've been reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and it's set in Nigeria, the same area that this kidnapping occurred. So I was hoping to find a way to connect what we were doing in class with a real world event, and I saw that the girls had been kidnapped and that this movement had been starting with the Bring Back Our Girls and how popular it was, and that there wasn't really much going on our side as far as what's actually happening to bring the girls back. And so I presented it to my students and asked them if they'd like to meet one day and if they'd wanted to come up with a way that we could contribute and raise awareness, and resulted in the 250 girls that we were able to gather for the photo.
So for anyone who doesn't know, could you explain the photo a bit more?
Sure. We had the whole campus wear red that day because that was the color the mothers were wearing and using for their protests, because nothing had been happening. It was a month later. The kidnapping started on April 14th, and so we staged our Blake Goes Red for May 14th, exactly 1 month, and those 276 girls were still missing. And so we met with the girls, and we decided to get the word out and see if we could get the same amount of people so that our country could see this is what 276 girls looks like. This is what the whole in our community would look like if something comparable had happened to us. And so with the help of students, we were able to, we asked them all to wear red, and we passed out numbers, and we all wore a number on our shirt so that we were going to stand in and stand up for one of those girls.
So tell us how this experience has affected you. Like, were you just willing to jump in and do it, or were you able to convince your friends to jump in as well?
When Ms. Ledford, she came to us in 7th period and she explained what we were doing, especially with the picture that we did. I thought that was so powerful, only because no one has done that. Like, if you see on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, no one has done that. They did, 2 friends, 3 friends wearing red and just holding signs and stuff, but I was just like, wow, nobody has actually tried to get 276 girls to take a picture. So I definitely was like one of the first people to raise my hand, and I was on it. I've never really been a part of anything that big and that serious. So, and I really didn't have any background knowledge on anything that was happening. I didn't even know until she brought it to my attention. So I wanted to be a part of that. So so we did that. We had meetings to prepare for the picture. We had signs being made. We had paint. We had everything. We were really excited, and the people that I've gotten to go to the meetings, they were really excited about it also. At first, they didn't really know what they were getting into. They were just like, oh, Kendra, is this a lot of work? I'm just like, no, just show up, please. But they were excited after they actually started getting into it. Then they got excited because they got to take the pictures for themselves and put it on their Instagram, get a lot of likes on that. And I think that alone really made the teens, just really inspired and really just motivated to be a part of something.
So social media has been a huge part in this and spreading the message.
Huge.
But we wanted to take it a step further. We talked about hashtag activism, and we wanted to obviously raise awareness, but we also got together after the photo, and we wanted to create messages to send to the families, because that's what we were thinking about. Like, this is what I stood in for one of those girls. Kendra stood in for one of those girls. And so we wanted to send messages to their families like, we're here for you, we're thinking of you. And so with the help of some friends who knew Hausa, the language that they speak over there, we were making posters and we're thinking of you in their native language that we can send to them, so that we're supporting the families while doing more than just taking a photo.
Yeah, definitely.
What kind of response did you get from this? What kind of outcome became?
The response, the first initial response that came like immediately was just the whole school wearing red. That got them excited because, they could wear their bandanas. It really wasn't, like, oh, this group only did it because this group only knew about it. No, the whole school knew about it. They wore bandanas, they wore red belts. It was crazy, but I loved it. Just because everybody could just do it. It was something that everybody could be a part of, and it was free. And that's how you get people into it at first, even if they don't know what it is. But when you actually can educate them on what it is, then they can get twice as more excited.
And we also made sure that we involved the young men, and we brought out the Real Men Don't Buy Girls, because we wanted to bring to their attention that they can do something too. Even though the photo was for the ladies on campus, we also were able to get the men involved.
What was the most memorable thing about the whole project?
The most memorable was when we actually had to get together and make the signs. We had this red paint that we got from a teacher, and I think that was the best part because it just took us back to our kindergarten days where, we all had the time where we put paint on the table. I don't know if y'all did that, but I did that and I enjoyed that. We put paint on our faces and went to the next class, and they're just like, what are you doing? But then we can actually tell them right then and there, oh, we're doing this for the Nigerian girls and everything. And they was like, oh, I want to be part of that. So then that's how we got more people, because they wanted paint too. So it was really fun. It was fun.
Okay, well, thank you. When we come back, we have Representative Ross Bano, who is on the forefront of legislation in Florida for human sex trafficking. So we'll be back after this. Welcome back to Global Teen Summit. I'm your host, Ashley.
And I'm Vasakan, and these are our panelists, Natalia, Isabel, and Xavier.
We have tonight Representative Ross Spano, who is on the forefront of legislation in Florida for human sex trafficking. Hello, Mr. or Representative Spano.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Can you tell us about your bills that you had passed?
Sure, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm excited that you guys are engaged in this effort and in the battle. The bill that we had that passed this year was what we call an omnibus bill. So it did a lot of different things and arose out of a legislative working group that consisted of about 20 to 25 members of the House of Representatives of Florida. And essentially what we started doing about 6 months ago is we started getting together and we asked ourselves, what are the things that still need to be done? What are the things that are undone and that as a state from Tallahassee that we can do to help fight the problem? So this is what the bill looked like and this is what passed. It does away with the statute of limitations for the prosecution of traffickers. Statute of limitations is the period within which law enforcement and prosecutors have to charge someone with a crime. And so right now it's only 4 years. Well, before the law passed it was 4 years. Now there is no statute of limitations. It makes state law consistent with federal law, and it gives law enforcement and prosecutors the time that they need to gather the evidence to prosecute these folks. So that's the first thing. Second thing it does is it increases penalties pretty much across the board for traffickers. And so if you traffic an individual, a minor or a disabled person, then you have a 25-year mandatory prison term to look forward to. We wanted to send a really, really clear message that this wasn't something that we were going to tolerate. So it did that as well. It also created a new crime, a felony for branding a victim. You may or may not have seen that in some cases traffickers will actually brand their victim with a tattoo. Sometimes it's on the inside of their mouth. And so there's now a separate felony crime for that. It also does something to fight underage participation in adult strip clubs. Be quite open and honest and frank about it. So about 4 or 5 months ago, there was a young lady that was 13 that was found stripping in a Miami club. And so from a legislative standpoint, we wanted to send a very clear message that that the operators of these adult clubs make sure that they verify the age and the identity of prospective employees or independent contractors. So now what they have to do is they've got to get picture identification. They've got to communicate with the government authorizing entity. For instance, for a driver's license, it would be the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles, and confirm that this is the person that they say they are and that they're at least 18 years of age. And then they have to keep that verifying information on record, and then it allows the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulations or their agent, appointed agent, to unannounced go into that facility and make sure that the persons that are there are in fact who they say they are and that they're at least 18 years of age. So those are some of the things that we did that we think are going to make a big difference and go a long way toward the effort.
Do our panelists have any questions?
Real quick, just wanted to know what would you say is the difference in the punishments between a John and a pedophile?
Yeah, there is a big difference, and I'm glad you asked that question, Isabel, because one of the things that we tried to do in our omnibus bill was increase the current penalty for a first-time offense for a John, which is, all right, hold on to your seats, it's only a second-degree misdemeanor. Little more than a parking ticket. And so what we've got it, so I'm going to get to your question about the difference here, but that's an issue that we must address. Mm-hmm. Unless we address the demand, we're not going to fix this problem. So the bill attempted to fix that, unfortunately, and we could talk for the next half hour about why that portion of the bill didn't pass. Off air, I'd love to give you specifics, but it didn't pass. But now with regard to pedophiles, certainly there are criminal penalties and prison terms, and those are felonies, much more serious crimes. But you cannot talk about the issue of trafficking without addressing the demand question. And that is something that, at least as of now, we haven't done sufficiently.
I have a question. Why is a pedophile considered different than a John or a pimp? To me, they're doing the same exact thing.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Here's the rationalization, though. Here's the thought process of the folks that would oppose increased penalties against Johns. They would say to you that, at least in the context of an adult who they're engaging with, that it's a voluntary participation, okay? That you have, some folks refer to prostitution as a victimless crime. Well, here's my argument, and probably yours too. If you accept the fact that a large percentage of the folks that are participating with these Johns are not doing it voluntarily, that they're being forced to do it or coerced to do it by a pimp or a trafficker, how can you say that's a victimless crime? It's totally absurd. It's absolutely nonsensical. So in my opinion, there is no difference. There is no difference. And we need to start treating Johns as if there is no difference.
Absolutely.
Sorry. From a global standpoint and I guess a legislative standpoint, how would you propose, I guess, a global change in such a horrific industry?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough question because you've got different countries around the world who have their own penal systems, they have their own laws, and so the difficulty that you have with enforcing penalties and laws globally when there's different jurisdictions that have different rules, that's the challenge. I think what we'd like to be able to do to see happen is for countries to come together and for there to be more of a global effort to cooperate with each other. And certainly from a sanction standpoint, countries like the United States of America and the other industrialized and more civilized nations can exert pressure, economic and so forth, on these nations. And then at some point and at some level just insist that the things have got to change. I know that from a national standpoint, there obviously is something that we can do. From a state standpoint, there obviously is something we can do. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the will to do it? That's the most important question we have to ask. Do we have the will to do it? If we have the will to do it, we will do it. I choose to think that we do, and I for one do, and obviously you guys do as well. So we're going to see some positive change. We're going to see this problem addressed, stamped out, and we're going to be, my prayer is that in 10, 15 years, we're going to be looking back thinking, how did we ever let that go on so long? But thank God we stopped it.
Why do you think it took so long? Like, why now, basically? Why didn't this happen before? Because obviously this has been an issue that's been going on for years and generations. And it's one of those, like, don't talk about it type of issues.
Yeah, that's a great question too. I will say initially that there's been an effort to address it on different levels. In 2011, I think it was, I wasn't in the legislature at that time, but we passed something called the Safe Harbor Act, which treats children children who are engaged in the sex industry as victims instead of criminals, presumption that they are victims. So that was a good first step. The next year we passed a bill that cracked down on massage parlors, right, who were just fronts essentially for sex trafficking operations. So we did that the next year. Last year we passed a bill that I sponsored that allows a victim of sex trafficking, if they've been convicted of a crime in the context of that process, to petition the court to vacate the conviction as if it never happened, so they can move on with their life. That was a pretty neat thing. More needs to be done. Why has it taken just till the last 2 or 3 years? I think that the best answer I can have for you is that there just wasn't the awareness. Whether it was a question of us not seeing it or not choosing to see it, I don't know. But there certainly is now a level of awareness of it. There certainly is a growing understanding of the problem and a growing willingness to confront the problem. And I think you'll see that evidenced as in terms of legislation and law enforcement. One of the big things, if I just may really quickly, the two issues that still need to be tackled, I think, from my standpoint, and I think I can probably get most folks in Tallahassee to agree with me, is number one, the demand. We talked about that, Isabel. We have to address it. No question, no compromise, it has to be done, period. That's the first side. The second issue is that we've got to give the resources to law enforcement and prosecutors to investigate the crimes and to prosecute the crimes, because it doesn't matter what books we have, what laws we have on the books, if we don't have the resources to investigate the crimes and prosecute the folks that are engaging in the crimes, all the laws in the world aren't going to make a difference. So those are the two things we're going to tackle in the years to come.
Well, I think on behalf of all of us, we'd just like to say thank you. And it's nice to know that there's people that are actually trying to make change, especially in legislation. So thanks.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you. We are going to go to a commercial break, but stay tuned because we'll have more from our guests right after this.
What would happen, how would I feel if my son or daughter was a victim of trafficking?
Welcome back to Global Teen Summit. Our topic, if you're just tuning in, is legislation and teen sex trafficking. And with us is Representative Spano. So, panelists, any questions?
Do you have any personal ties or links to human sex trafficking, or is it just a disturbing event for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank God I don't have any personal experience with it. I have a very, very close friend that I went to law school with who's very engaged in the fight, and he got me into it. But I think the thing that causes me to feel almost compelled to be engaged in the fight is I have 4 kids of my own. I have a daughter and 3 sons. And driving over here on the way here tonight, I was thinking to myself, what would happen? How would I feel if my son or daughter was a victim of trafficking? I would do anything to help them. I would do anything to save them. I would do anything to fight for them. I don't care what I had to do. And I thought to myself, you know what? Kids, young folks, boys and girls who are victims right now of trafficking deserve to have somebody like me, like you, and you, and you, and you, and you care about them just as much as a dad would. They need someone to care about them. So that's kind of where my motivation comes from. I'm kind of a fighter. I'm kind of an underdog. I hate it when people are taken advantage of and are hurt. And so I kind of think that's where my fire in my belly comes from.
Are there any new laws being developed right now?
Yeah, actually we're working again over the course of this summer and fall. This same legislative working group that I told you about just a moment ago. And so the focus of the effort this next year, legislative session, we start up again in November, and then the session begins in March. So the focus of the effort will be twofold, and it'll go to the 2 issues that I mentioned a moment ago that I think still need to be addressed, and that is the demand, increased penalties against Johns and pimps, and also increased funding to law enforcement and to prosecutors. I would love to see every law enforcement agency around the state have a human trafficking task force. We do that with drugs. We have a drug task force within almost every jurisdiction of law enforcement. I think we ought to have the same thing with human trafficking. And we ought to be able to create those kinds of synergies and those kinds of focused efforts with law enforcement and prosecutors like we do with drugs. So those are the 2 efforts, demand and appropriate funding to investigate and prosecute.
What kind of programs or different things are we doing for victims? As I know, with drug addicts, we have rehab, and alcoholics, we have the same thing. So what kind of programs are we having for victims who have been through this and need help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have anything on a state level that's specifically directed toward adult victims of trafficking. We do have some things that are focused on victims of child trafficking. Matter of fact, this year I didn't talk about it, but I didn't sponsor the bill, but there was another bill that passed that actually requires DCF, Department of Children and Families, who are responsible for the well-being of children, to actually create more organization between local agencies so that when a victim of sex trafficking comes into the system as a dependent into the DCF system, that a decision is made and an appropriate analysis is done of are they a victim of sex trafficking, and if so, to make sure that they get placed in the proper setting for them to get the kind of rehabilitation they need. The bill also actually created organizational structure for safe houses for children, specifically for children. And so I was really excited that passed this year. And that legislation also, as I said, requires DCF now to have specific organization and within their structure, specific guidance as to how these children are going to be treated when they come in and what types of care that they need to rehabilitate them and get them the care that they need.
Now, as teenagers in our community, what do you ask of us to do to fight this back when we don't have the permission and eligibility to vote?
Yeah. 2 things. One is that you have eyes and you have ears. And you're in your community. I'm not in your community. You're in your community. So if you see something that doesn't look right, don't be afraid to say something about it. Don't be afraid to tell someone, okay? Because law enforcement can't be everywhere all the time, but eyes in the community can be. So that's the first thing. Second thing you guys can do is very obviously practical too, and that is that you can help those of us who are engaged in the battle, either from a legislative standpoint or some of the other great organizations out there that are trying to meet the needs of victims, raising awareness. You can't do it all, but you can do something. Find something you're passionate about, something that you enjoy, whether it's legislation. If you enjoy legislation in the legal process, find out what we're doing with this bill next year, right? And whenever it gets referred to a committee, call the chairman of the committee, talk to his staff person, call every person on the committee and say, I want you to hear this bill. I want you to calendar this bill. When the bill gets calendared, you call every committee member and you say, I want you to vote in favor of this bill. It discourages me sometimes when I hear folks say, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't make a difference in the process. You can make a difference. You can make a difference. And just by being engaged and being that squeaky wheel, right? This is what I want you to do. You're accountable to us, the people. Get on board with this. This is what needs to happen. You will make a difference. So I'd love to have your help on that front if you want to help me. And then there are a bunch of other folks too, some of which are speaking, tonight that can tell you a lot more about how other ways that you can be engaged. So that's just a couple of ways you can be involved, even though you can't vote, but you will be able to shortly.
Have you ever encountered a victim or a John, and if so, how was that?
Well, I've had an opportunity to get to know lots of victims, and it's always a very humbling experience because, just from a personal standpoint, you try and be empathetic, you try and understand, but really, unless you've experienced it yourself, you really can't know what it's like. So I try my best to understand, and so I have, from that standpoint, I actually have met a trafficker who was rehabilitated and was actually engaged now in the fight against trafficking, which is pretty cool. And so there's one lots of special people, but a special young lady that I met last year. Remember the bill I told you about that allows a victim to petition the court to vacate a criminal conviction? Mm-hmm. This is a young lady that she was a second-year law student at Barry University, and she couldn't get a job. She couldn't get admitted to the bar because she had been convicted of a crime. What better person to be an advocate to fight on behalf of victims than a person who's been there? Because of that bill, she can now get admitted to the bar and fight like crazy as an attorney, as an advocate. So that was a neat experience.
Well, I guess on behalf of all the panelists and the host here, we just want to say thank you, and it's nice to know that there's someone in legislation who's actually trying to make a change, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to be joined by two survivors of human sex trafficking who are now advocates for change, so tune in for that.
I remember he asked for the money that I had just made, but then his words to me next were, I'm proud of you, because you're the first girl that did everything that I told them to do.
Started off low, then they turned global. We fought for integration.
So welcome back to Global Teen Summit, and with us now are Connie Rose and Telesia Espinoza, who are survivors of teen sex trafficking and now strive to eradicate this epidemic, I guess you would say. So could you both, I guess, tell us about your experiences?
I'll go first. Like she said, or like he said, my name is Telesia Espinoza, and I'm a survivor of sex trafficking here in the United States. Grew up in a very abusive home, and my look on love was distorted at such a young age, and so I became very promiscuous at the age of 12, going into my teenage years. That led me into a life of working in a strip club. And during that time, working at a strip club, met this man that came walking in and literally was mesmerized by just the way that he carried himself, the way that he looked. And one conversation would lead to many conversations. And one of those conversations one night led to us leaving Miami, which is where I was born and raised. And he took me to Cleveland, Ohio, and kind of just told me exactly what I was going to do and put me outside of the van that we had traveled in that night. It was the same night that we got there, and he put me out of the van and told me what to do. And I did exactly what he said, because I was afraid that if I didn't, something bad would happen to me. And that night when I came in, that after working all night, as he watched me, I remember he asked for the money that I had just made, but then his words to me next were, "I'm proud of you, because you're the first girl that did everything that I told them to do." And I was focused on, he's proud of me, because I had never heard a man in my life tell me that he was proud of me. And so that would be 4.5 years of me selling my body out on street corners all over the US, and having a quota of $500 to $1,000 a night, to where I worked 7 nights a week and 364 days a year because I had Christmas off. And so that was my life for 4.5 years of just being exploited all over the US.
Miss Connie, what about you?
Well, actually, I'm from Tampa. This is where I was raised, and for me, I am a survivor of over 14 years of incest and 4 years of sex trafficking, and my pimp was actually my dad. And so what that really meant for me was, and I was that good girl. I was that girl that came from a very religious family, was the girl that modeled, that was in pageants, that wasn't a straight A student, but was like B+ student. Danced, just modeled, just did everything. I wasn't that girl that you looked at and you would ever think that, during school I was doing what I was supposed to do, and at night I'd go home, and around 11 o'clock I'd have to leave, and I literally at times got picked up right in front of my house. And I lived this for almost 4 years of my life. And having your dad as your pimp is a lot different. For Telesia, and we do a lot of speaking together, for Telesia, it was someone that she didn't know, and that's really horrific. But imagine that it's someone that's supposed to take care of you, that's someone that you're really supposed to trust, that is supposed to be that person that when someone abuses you is supposed to go and stand up for you, and instead they're the person doing it. And then also for me, because I lived here in Tampa, I never had to leave the area. Like Telesia traveled all throughout the United States. For me, I was pimped right here, along the Causeway, which is Municipal Beach, along that area, throughout Clearwater, along Hillsborough Avenue, downtown Tampa, right in these areas right here. And it wasn't just like these scuzzy men, that came and bought me. It was our politicians, it was our judges, it was our attorneys. Most of them were professional men that bought me on a very regular basis. And I was lucky because, we all have our different stories of how did we get out. And when I was 19, I met a really nice guy, and that was my way out. Because I wanted to go to college, I wanted to be an attorney, and I was told no. I was told that I taught you every single thing that you know. I had been in pornography since I was 2 years old, so I learned a lot about pornography. I learned a lot about how to perform. I learned every sex act that you could possibly imagine. And so what I was told was, just use it. Use your body. Use what I taught you. You don't need a college education. And just real quickly, because people want to know, well, how does a 16-year-old become a prostitute? Well, about 2 months before this happened, I was in a pageant, and I remember saying to my mom, "Mom, who are these men? Like, these men are staring at me like I have no clothes on." And I was so uncomfortable. And she's like, "I don't know, sweetie. I have no idea, who they are." And so right before my 16th birthday, I had made a decision. I was done. I couldn't live like this good girl life anymore, and then this being a whore, basically. And I used to keep a knife underneath my mattress and just knew that someday I would have the strength to kill him and probably kill myself. And so that day came, and I just remember taking the knife out and putting it to his back and said, "I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. So you're going to die, and then I'm going to die, and that's it." And he literally, I can hear it now still resonating in me. He literally just laughed in my face and said, "I've been waiting for this day."
And that was your father?
This was my dad. And I'm like, "What? Like, what do you mean?" And he said, "You know those men that you asked your mother about?" He said, "Those men were there to see you. That's how I'm marketing you, and you're going to be a prostitute." Now think, what 16-year-old girl can be a prostitute? In my 16-year-old mind, a prostitute was a woman that had big hair, was much older, was very hard-looking, definitely not a 16-year-old girl. And I said, okay. And from that point on, my life made such an incredible change.
I also think it's interesting from both of your stories how there's a lot of assumptions about what pimps look like, what who are the people who buy the girls or the boys, and who are the people who are trafficked. And a lot of these things, there's a lot of myths around, but a lot of them aren't true. Like you said, he was carrying himself like he was of importance, and you said the people that were buying you and using you were just politicians and higher up people, which is really kind of shocking. And I think that there's a fact that 50% of people who are trafficked are male, and I think there's an assumption that it's mostly female. So I guess it just makes you realize that no one's really safe, and it's really, really scary to think about.
And the fact that it can happen within your family.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, 35% of sex trafficking victims are trafficked by someone that they know.
Well, we will open questions to our panelists.
If there was a victim watching right now, what would you say to them?
I would say find someone that you can trust. And that's hard to do because usually the person you trusted is the person that perpetrated you. But find someone. Like, this is why we do what we do as survivors, is we share our story, because there's always another survivor out that's listening to our story that will come forward and say, I'm a survivor. So find someone that you can go and talk to and that you can say, this is what happened to me, so that you can move forward, because there is really a great life after.
So I would like to ask Telesia, would you say, you said that you were also a recruiter. What would you be sent out or scout out to look for in possible recruitees or possible victims? Like, what would you look?
That was part of our job. And you know, our job wasn't just to go sell our bodies out on the street corners and do the different things that we did, but it was also to recruit. That's just part of what came along with it. For me, it was more looking for someone who is vulnerable, just like me, you know, a girl that's standing by herself and just isn't really, you know, she's shy. And I didn't do a lot of recruiting because I was very jealous. For most of the time that he had me, it was just me and him. He never really had other girls. He acted as if he was my boyfriend, and he made me feel as if he was my boyfriend, but yet I worked selling my body. And so I would see other girls that would recruit. And in that life, it's very lonely because most of the time you can't really talk to anybody, because if you talk to another girl, she's trying to recruit you to come back to her home and to her pimp. And so for the most part, we have to stay to ourselves. But in the recruiting process, it's way off the charts where, you know, you could be shy, you could be vulnerable, you kind of look for the same way that you're feeling in a way. Some girls are recruited in the malls, you know, by older women or by, you know, their peers. A lot of parties that are going on right now, they're being recruited in house parties. And so with that being said, with us doing a program like this, it's getting the word out there to know what to look for. And, you know, if you're being asked questions like, you know, what do you think about making some money tonight? You know, sometimes we just like, oh, you're kidding, you know, what are you talking about? And we kind of just push it off. But questions like that are really serious because the person who's asking it is really serious, even though you may take it as a joke. And I remember being told of a party that happened, and these girls, you know, it was a friend that invited another friend, to this party, and when she got there, you know, they have on the table, you know, Skittles and, you know, really colorful candy. Well, didn't know that within that candy were drugs, and they were drugging the girls that were coming to this party, and they were selling them, and they were videotaping them. Yeah, it is terrible. And so now you have this girl that's being videotaped, and now there's blackmail that comes along with this videotape. And so there's just so many variables that come with recruiting, and too many for this segment to talk about.
And just saying that, like, I never knew about that. Like, you can actually mix it with candy. Like, I've never heard of anyone doing that, but the fact that that's something that could happen.
Scary, very scary.
Like, no one.
Yeah, it makes you not want to touch a bowl of candy that's sitting on a table at a party that you go to.
But how many times have you been to a party and you just carried your drink around and you're talking to your friends and you're not paying any attention? Do you really know who's come by and dropped something in that drink? You have no clue. So I'm like always, even with my own kids, take a water bottle and put your drink in that water bottle and just put the top back on it.
Or even the people who's mixing the drinks, they could do
that's
something.
like the same thing. You always bring everything with you yourself. And I know that might sound like overkill, but the truth is we know so many other survivors that that's what happened to them.
Yeah.
You know, good girls, good boys that, you know, come from great families that just went to a high school party. And before they knew it, they were having sex with someone, and it was being videotaped and photographs, and the next day at school they're shown those, and then they're say, you know what, do you want your parents to know about this? So if you don't, then you better do what I say. And before you know it, you're in this life.
So I guess from both of your personal experiences, is there any, I guess, tips you would give in order to stay safe, as you know how it works and how the system works? Is there any things that you would say to stay safe in situations like these?
Just always be aware. And you have to trust to a degree, but like we just talked about the parties, you know, don't take anything from anyone. If you're going to bring it yourself. Know what it is that you have yourself. And when someone goes, oh no, it's just like an M&M or it's a Skittle or here, just take my prescription, it's okay. No, it's not okay. And just always be aware. You know, be aware of your surroundings. Be aware you're going. Always let people know where you are. You know, we even talk about the buddy system, but even with the buddy system, you might go out with two girlfriends, but tell somebody else where you're going.
Ms. Telesia, how did you actually get out of the life of being trafficked?
That's a very good question. I got out actually just being able to walk away, which I'm very blessed to be able to say that, because most girls aren't able to just walk away. Some are actually rescued or literally have to run for their lives. And it was actually in 2001 that I walked away from it, kind of where I hadn't made any money the day before, which was New Year's Eve, and came home and had to deal with my pimp. When I didn't make money, I either got beat physically or I got beat down extremely low to the ground by his words. And that day I had not made any money, and ended up going to bed, waking up the next morning, which, you know, January 1, 2001, and as soon as I saw him, I was going out on a call, and as soon as our eyes locked, kind of almost like the same night that when I saw him in the club, our eyes locked, but it was different this time. And as soon as I saw him, I said, I can't do this anymore. And when I told him, I said, I have to talk to you when I get back. And he says, no, talk to me now. And that's what came out of my mouth. I said, I can't do this anymore. Well, he probably thought like, yeah, right, you've left 2 times before, because I did. I had left twice within that 4.5 years and came back. But this time was different. And so his response to me was, well, let me figure out what I'm gonna do. And his figuring out what he was going to do was him leaving, getting 2 more girls, bringing them back to the house that we were at, stayed the night, and left to California the next day. So for me leaving, for that 1 girl that left, he got 2 more. And so that's just a wake-up call to our generation and to your guys' generation, is that not to put fear in you, but to make you aware. Like Connie said, to make you aware of your surroundings, make you aware of the people that you hang out with, not wanting to hang with older people, because sometimes those older people have bad intentions. Not everybody, but some of them do. And so just knowing who you hang around. And so that was my way of getting out. So when he left, it gave me the opportunity to be able to leave. And so at that time I was in Vegas and moved back to Florida and ended up going back into stripping because that's all I knew. Well, ended up getting sick. And so during that time that I was sick, which was for an entire year, with severe panic attacks to where I couldn't leave my house because of these panic attacks, that gave me the opportunity of not wanting to ever go back to him. I never wanted to go back to that lifestyle, but because he had such a grip on my heart, because I loved him, he made me fall in love with him. And so with that, that was the hardest thing to let go of, was that love for him, not for the life, but for him. And so now I've been out since 2001.
I understand, like Telesia said, that she grew up in a not broken home, basically. But for you, was your home broken as well? Like, where was your mom when this was happening?
No, I didn't grow up in a broken home. I had two parents, two great parents, so this is going to sound strange. But one side of my family was this wonderful, loving family that, you know, all the kids came to our house. You know, they're the ones that did the great parties. Not that we were wealthy, but they just really put everything they had into their two children. Then there was this horrific side of our family because both my parents were mentally, physically, and verbally abusive. And then, of course, my father ended up having over 300 victims by the time he passed away in 2008, and still at the age of 82 was a pimp. And so, and I share that with you because you can only imagine what it had to be like in our household. But I'm going to speak to my mom, okay? This is my soapbox. Anyone that's ever lived through anything in their life, and there's no one in this world that's been scathed by not having something, right? We've all been touched by some kind of trauma in our lives. Deal with it. See, my mother didn't deal with her childhood. My mother didn't deal with the fact that she came from an alcoholic father that was extremely abusive. So all she could see when I was 13 years old and told her for the first time was, what do you want me to do? Like, all I have to do is tell him no, and he'll stop. She believed that. Because then all she could see was, this is my house. You know, I didn't live this way. I didn't grow up this way. I've worked so hard, so many years for us to live in this home. This is my castle. She also looked at, I have an older brother, and you know, one day you're going to get married, you're going to change your name. He's always going to carry the family name. And so because she never dealt with her own trauma, her own childhood, she just pretty much, you know, put the little hands over the ears and over the eyes and just said, it'll just go away, and it didn't go away. It escalated.
Do you think that's an issue with this topic for some girls? Because some girls do, or not even girls, just guys come from homes like yours where it is a good home, like there's nothing going on. But like how your mom covered her ears, do you think, like, what is your opinion on that?
Well, that's why I said my opinion is that people need to deal with their trauma, because when, let's just say you're a preacher, you're a school teacher, when a child, doesn't even have to be your own child, a child comes to you and says, you know, my brother's been touching me, my dad's been touching me, my parents are beating me at home, whatever the scenario is, you're not going to deal with it. You instead, even though you're a mandatory reporter, you might report just a little bit, but you aren't going to help that child deal with it because you have not dealt with your own stuff, what you've gone through. And so I just encourage everyone, I'm not saying you have to go through years and years of therapy, but I encourage everyone to deal with their own life, because you're talking about children.
Yeah. Now, how have you guys taken your experience and used it to help others and to prevent this from happening to others?
Well, other than just being a speaker, I mean, I'm an international speaker, and I work with other survivors. It's called Survivors Advocate Network and Victim to Survivors, and it's about giving them a voice. It's how do you take something that's so horrific that happened to you, and how do you turn around in a positive and share it in such a way so that you don't really traumatize other people, but you move everyone into action. But my other role, which I just absolutely love and adore, is I am Director of Survivor Programming and Leadership for Sail of Freedom. And Sail of Freedom is an organization in Sarasota. We have 2 residential programs for women 18 and older. We have a jail outreach, a street outreach, and then what's really just so dear to my heart is we have a prevention program for girls that are 12 to 17 years old. So I work with girls every single day. I train other survivors to work with the girls, and we go out and we talk to them. What is it about? What does a pimp look like? What are the different STDs? And take them to become leaders so that, one, it doesn't happen to them, but the other is they can look out for each other. They know all the signs to look for. And so it's about creating awareness, and it's about being an advocate, not just for myself, but for all of you.
And I have an organization called Be a Voice, and it's actually a ministry within our church. And I go out and I share my story of what happened to me, but also my purpose is to empower others to get behind the fight, and not just, my biggest thing is saying, okay, I don't want you to leave this place just saying that you've heard a survivor tell her story. I want you to be moved to action, like Connie said, to do something about it. And so I also help survivors on their journey to healing and restoration. So I'm able to share and partner with other organizations that are working with these victims to help them move forward in their lives.
Thank you both for joining us. Up next, we have child psychologist Dr. Kimberly Hodges, and also joining us will be Telesia again. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Global Teen Summit. If you're just joining us, we've been talking about sex trafficking. Right now, our guest is child psychologist Dr. Kimberly Hodges, a mother of a survivor, Camille Johnson, and a survivor turned advocate, Telesia Espinoza.
I guess I'll ask the first question to Dr. Hodges. Could you tell us a little bit about the psychological effects of being trafficked and how that affects?
Sure. Teens and adults that have experienced sex trafficking or human trafficking, they can experience a range of psychological problems. One of the most common problems is post-traumatic stress symptoms, which can involve symptoms relating to trauma. They can have flashbacks. Also, difficulty sleeping because they have racing thoughts throughout the night. Another problem that they have is that they have a hard time associating good and bad things that may trigger a response to their abuse. And also, another problem that they experience is a lack of trust in others. They have a hard time establishing relationships with others, and also establishing other attachments with other people, because people that they had attachments with were fake attachments.
So even after escaping sex trafficking, the effects still last long after?
It can last a long time,
Wow.
Especially without some type of counseling. It's many layers that we would have to dig through throughout a counseling session to help them cope with things. Trust is the first thing that we work on, especially in a counseling session. We have to establish trust with our survivors just so that they can talk to us and actually trust that we're willing to help them and that we empathize with them. And it's hard to even say that we understand what they're going through, because not every survivor experiences the same thing. So once you know one survivor that has gone through any type of human trafficking or childhood sexual abuse, you just know one survivor.
So as a mother of a survivor, explain how you were feeling, or what were your emotions, just basically your story on your experience with that the fact that it happened to your own child.
Your emotions are all over the place. It's just no one emotion. You feel hurt, rage, revenge. There's no one emotion.
And as the mother of a survivor, as what Dr. Hodges said about the effects, can you still see that?
Yes, I do, on a daily basis.
And it affects her life?
What were some signs that made you realize that your daughter was a victim?
She was running away. She was withdrawn. she was very angry.
From a parent's point of view, Ms. Johnson, how is what your daughter has been through and what she still continues to deal with today, how does that affect you in your life?
It affects me in my life on a day-to-day basis to see her struggle. Although I see the determination and I see the drive and the fight, it's still a struggle for her and for me as well, because no parent wants to see their child suffer and struggle just to do the day-to-day, just going to the store or just doing any simple things like going to the park or riding a bike. It's all a struggle, because in the old neighborhood, she was always heckled or put down for what she's been through. Instead of uplifting or encouraging her, there was always put down. So it's a struggle.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the panel here for talking to us. It was a very touching subject and we all learned a lot. After the break, we're going to wrap up with the panel and we're going to have a special music performance from Xavier right here. So tune in after the break.
Tampa Preparatory School offers students in grades 6 through 12 unparalleled education with its innovative, student-centered curriculum. Tampa Prep students are independent thinkers who learn through a proactive, hands-on approach. Tampa Preparatory School, a place to think, create, be yourself, aspire to excellence, and go beyond. More than just a college preparatory school, a preparation for life with a higher purpose than self. We encourage you to check out our website for more information.
Welcome back to Global Teen Summit. Our topic today was teen sex trafficking, and it was a very emotional and touching topic, and I'm sure we all learned a lot.
Yeah, really. So what did you guys find interesting or learn from our guest tonight?
I found it fascinating how someone who's supposed to be there as a shoulder to cry on can also be the reason why you're crying.
I found it very, very interesting with Telesia's story. Just hearing about what she's been through, and her story is absolutely amazing.
I found it interesting when Representative Ross Spanos said the charges for John is just a little bit over a parking ticket.
So now we would like to thank you on behalf of our entire cast for either attending or tuning in. And we would like one more round of applause for our amazing guest speakers. So now to Natalia to introduce our tonight's very special music artist.
Thank you. And tonight we have something super special for you guys. Our very own Zay, who just graduated from Leonard High School, is going to be performing his own song called Fortune Cookie. So everybody show some love for my boy Zay.
Hey. How y'all feeling tonight? I said, in Eastside Brooklyn, born and raised in the playground where I spend most of my days. And I want to rest in peace, but not in the grave. Rest with my family when we go on vacation. And life is like a job, but we never get paid. And when things get hard, why is it God that we blame? Things get hard and we try to make a change. Man, it's such a shame, so I stay away. I got twisted visions, I'm feeling so vivid. So I have problems, I start to get livid. This is my music, this will be my living. This my escape from the world that we live in. Fishes in the sea, but I'm never fishing. Homie just wishing for college tuitions. Need to understand that the fact we all different. Stop with the hatred and start with the venting. Take communication, round the waist, and think about the things in the world we changing. So I'm independent, this my declaration. So I'm blowing big and that's my proclamation. A road to success with no destination. If there's no plan A, plan B's to make it. So my fortune cookie said I had a deep meaning inside of me. People throwing low blows to get the rise in me. You say hip hop dead, well that's a lie to me. So my fortune cookie said I had a deep meaning inside of me. And people throwing low blows to get the rise with me. You say hip hop dead, well that's a lie to me. Hey.
then they turn global. We fought for integration, now we are antisocial. We can't make a change unless we use our vocals. So I pray to God in every moment I stay hopeful. Ain't no good intentions, everybody tryna hurt you. We like a guilty conscience cause nobody is remorseful. We could be heroes, but got them on